I never liked company parties, but that night I told myself it was important. Important to show my face, important to be seen supporting my wife in front of her colleagues, important to remind everyone that we were a team. She had been climbing the ladder fast, and I wanted to be the kind of husband who stood beside her, not behind her. So I put on my best suit, practiced a smile in the mirror, and walked into the venue holding her hand. From the very beginning, I felt something was off. She didn't squeeze my hand back. She didn't even look at me the way she used to when we walked into a room together. Instead, she kept scanning the crowd, her eyes darting from one group of coworkers to another, like I was nothing more than her plus one. I told myself not to read too much into it. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she wanted to make a good impression. Still, the coldness in her voice when she introduced me around felt like a slap. "This is my husband," she said flatly, as if the word itself was heavy. I tried to shake it off. I grabbed us drinks, laughed politely at jokes, stood by her side as she chatted. But the more I tried, the more I felt like wallpaper. Every time I leaned in, she leaned away. Every time I made a small comment, she brushed it aside. Finally, after the third round of fake laughter from her colleagues, I decided I wasn't going to just stand there all night. The band started playing a slow, romantic tune. Couples were drifting onto the dance floor. I turned to her and asked, softly, "Want to dance?" Her reaction hit me like a bucket of ice. She yanked her hand from mine and said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "No, I don't want to look tied down. I want to look free." For a split second, the room froze. Then came the laughter. Not cruel, but sharp enough to slice right through me. A few people chuckled into their drinks, others raised eyebrows, and one guy actually clapped his hand over his mouth to hide a grin. My face burned as I tried to laugh it off, but the humiliation stuck to me like glue. She turned back to her conversation as if I hadn't just been gutted in public. I stood there, abandoned in plain sight, pretending to admire the chandelier so no one would see my jaw clench. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not enough to shatter, but enough to make me step back and reassess. A few songs later, when my wife was busy basking in the attention of her coworkers, I caught the eye of a female colleague across the room. We'd always been friendly at work, trading smiles in meetings, sharing the occasional coffee break. Without overthinking it, I walked over and asked her to dance. She hesitated only a second before taking my hand. And when we stepped onto the floor, something shifted. The band played a soft, jazzy number, and somehow we moved together like we'd rehearsed it for years. Her hand fit perfectly in mine. Her eyes met mine without flinching, and for the first time all night, I felt seen. The crowd noticed too. A murmur rippled through the room, followed by applause and whistles. People smiled, some even clapped in rhythm. I could feel my wife's gaze drilling into us from across the floor, but I didn't look her way. For those few minutes, it was just the two of us, spinning and swaying, and the humiliation from earlier melted into something else entirely, something almost sweet. But sweetness never lasts when envy is in the room. When the song ended, and people actually applauded, I caught sight of my wife storming toward us. Her face was twisted in fury, her jaw tight, her eyes wild. She snatched a massive glass of water from a passing table, and before I could react, she dumped the entire thing over my head. Ice-cold water soaked my hair, my suit, everything. The crowd roared. Laughter, clapping, whistles. It was a circus, and I was the clown in the center ring. My wife basked in it, arms folded, a smirk curling at her lips like she'd just won the grand prize. I walked out of that room dripping, humiliated, and disgraced. She stayed behind, glowing in the spotlight she'd stolen. And in that moment, I swore to myself, this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with that same cold ache in my chest. My suit still hung damp over the shower rod, a wrinkled reminder of the night before. I couldn't even look at it without hearing the laughter again. The sound of glasses clinking, of applause not for me, but for her little performance. My wife, the star of the show. Me, the fool who didn't know his role until the curtain dropped. She wasn't home when I woke up. I didn't bother asking where she had gone. Maybe she was already basking in the retelling of her story at brunch, her coworkers congratulating her for the epic moment she pulled off. Maybe she was scrolling through the messages, the ones saying, "You killed it," and "iconic." I imagined her grinning while I sat in silence, staring at the coffee maker as it burbled. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Clara, the colleague who danced with me. Hey, just wanted to check if you're okay. Last night was a lot. I read it 3 times before I answered. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, trying to find words that didn't sound pitiful. Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks again for the dance. You didn't have to step in like that. Her reply was quick. I wanted to. You look like you needed it. And just like that, something in me softened. Because she was right, I had needed it. That brief moment on the dance floor was the only time in weeks I'd felt seen. We agreed to grab coffee later in the week, just as friends. At least that's how I justified it. But when we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe 2 days later, sipping lattes and laughing about how bad the company band had been, it didn't feel like just friends. There was an ease there, a warmth I'd forgotten existed. Clara wasn't flashy like my wife. She wasn't performing for anyone. She listened. She leaned in when I spoke. When she laughed, it wasn't at me, it was with me. And when the conversation lulled, there wasn't that heavy silence I'd grown used to at home. There was comfort. Weeks passed, and our coffee breaks turned into lunches, then into late-night phone calls that stretched past midnight. My wife barely noticed. She was too busy with her own spotlight, posting pictures from work events, captioning them with inspirational quotes about living free and finding your voice. People ate it up. Every photo, every post, every stage smile earned her another 100 followers. Meanwhile, Clara and I built something quiet. Not loud or showy, but real. She came over one Friday evening with a bottle of wine, and we cooked pasta together in my kitchen. No fancy plating, no perfect Instagram angles, just us, laughing when the sauce splattered across my shirt. And when she leaned against the counter, eyes sparkling in the dim kitchen light, I realized I hadn't felt that alive in years. Our first kiss was hesitant, careful, almost guilty. But when it happened, it was like a switch flipped. The dam broke, and everything I'd been holding back, the anger, the humiliation, the loneliness, poured into that moment. She didn't pull away. She held me like she understood every scar, every crack, every piece of me my wife had chipped away at. Soon, my quiet life began to fill with little snapshots of happiness. Sunday mornings with Clara wrapped in blankets, her hair messy and her laugh unfiltered. Evenings on the couch watching old movies. Breakfasts of burnt toast and orange juice that tasted better than any dinner party my wife had ever dragged me to. I started posting those moments, not to brag, not to hurt anyone, but because I finally wanted to share something real. But of course, she saw them. My wife. And rage doesn't look good on Instagram filters. At first, she ignored it publicly, still posing for her independent woman brand. But in private, her texts came sharp, demanding, "You're embarrassing me. Stop posting her. People are asking questions." I didn't reply. Let her stew. Because for the first time, I wasn't the fool in her story anymore. I was writing a new one of my own. If there's one thing my wife has always been good at, it's spinning a story. When the photos of Clara and me started to appear, casual, unposed, little slices of a life finally worth living, she didn't confront me face to face. Not really. Instead, she took the stage she'd been building for months, her social media. At first it was subtle. A post about rediscovering herself after letting go of what no longer served her. A photo of her at a rooftop bar, hair catching the city lights, captioned, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away." Comments flooded in. "So proud of you. Inspiration. Queen energy." She liked every one of them. Then came the interviews, if you could call them that. Little features in company newsletters, quick sound bites during networking events. She painted herself as the strong, independent woman who had the courage to leave behind a weak, unworthy husband. She told half-truths with the polish of a TED Talk. I realized I couldn't shrink myself for someone else's comfort. I chose freedom. The audience clapped like she'd just recited scripture. Her following exploded. She turned her humiliation stunt into a brand. Suddenly, she was being invited to panels about women in leadership. She got a feature in a local business magazine. And then the big one, a promotion. Senior manager. The very job she'd been clawing toward for years. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. Every time someone forwarded me one of her posts, I deleted it. Every time someone whispered, "Did you see what she said about you?" I smiled and changed the subject. My silence became its own kind of shield. I let her bask in her small victories. Let her climb higher on the ladder she thought was solid. Because I knew what she didn't. Ladders built on lies eventually collapse. Clara worried about me sometimes. Doesn't it bother you? She asked one night as we sat on my couch, her head resting against my shoulder. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. Of course it does, I admitted. But patience cuts deeper than anger. Let her think she's winning. It'll make the fall that much harder. And oh, she thought she was winning. She flaunted her freedom everywhere. She showed up at parties with her coworkers, dazzling in dresses that screamed confidence. She gave toasts about reinvention, about shedding dead weight. People clapped, laughed, cheered. They ate it up like candy. And the more they applauded, the more reckless she became. Behind the curtain, though, she wasn't careful. I knew, because I started gathering. Not obsessively, not like a man nursing bitterness, but methodically. Screenshots of emails where she threw colleagues under the bus to make herself look better. Photos of her cozying up to executives at networking dinners. Whispers from people in her office who confided in me after one too many drinks, tired of her manipulations. I didn't seek it all out. Some of it just landed in my lap, like the universe was keeping receipts on my behalf. The truth was simple. Her rise wasn't built on strength. It was built on stepping on others, on playing the victim, on selling a narrative that looked good on a phone screen but cracked under real weight. And I knew when to strike. For now, I kept my silence. Let her wear her crown, let her stand under the spotlight. Because every spotlight casts a shadow, and hers was growing larger by the day. One evening, as Clara and I sat together eating takeout, she asked, "Do you ever regret it? That she's out there telling the world her version of the story?" I thought about it, then shook my head. No, because when the truth finally comes out, it won't just be a crack in her mask. It'll be the whole thing shattering. Clara smiled softly, though there was a sadness in her eyes. Just promise me one thing. What's that? When the time comes, don't hold back. I looked at her, the woman who had seen me at my lowest, and still chosen to stand beside me. And I promised. I won't. My wife had never looked taller, louder, brighter. And she believed it, every second of it. By then, her social media was a highlight reel of freedom. Shots of her in expensive outfits with captions about independence. Glasses raised at happy hours with colleagues who once whispered about her, now hanging on to her every word. Even selfies at the gym, tagged with hashtag rise and grind. Every photo screamed one message. Look at me, I won. And people bought it. They cheered her on, celebrated her story, reposted her quotes like she was some kind of prophet. The narrative was locked in place. She was the strong woman who shed the dead weight of a weak husband and built a new life on her own terms. At work, it was even worse. She wasn't just promoted, she was paraded. Invited onto committees, spotlighted at meetings, asked to mentor younger staff. I heard about it through mutual acquaintances, people who thought they were being helpful when they said, "She's really doing great, huh?" I'd just nod, smile, and sip my drink. Let them believe it. Because while she climbed, I was building something else. It started small. Screenshots of her late-night emails where she casually rewrote history, crediting herself for projects she hadn't touched. A recording from a colleague, one she'd thrown under the bus, of her admitting she needed a scapegoat. Whispers from a junior employee who'd been pushed out of a promotion because my wife charmed the right executive over cocktails. None of it was a smoking gun on its own. But piece by piece, it was a pattern, a mosaic of manipulation. And the higher she climbed, the more reckless she became, leaving more evidence behind. Meanwhile, my life with Clara was steady, grounded. We didn't post every moment, but sometimes I'd share the quiet ones. Pancakes on Sunday, movie nights in sweatpants, her head resting on my shoulder as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Nothing flashy, nothing performative, just real. Of course, my wife saw them. And though she smiled on camera, I knew it burned her. Because her freedom posts got applause, but my quiet moments with Clara looked like happiness. Real happiness. The kind you can't fake. And that's what she could never stand. Being outshined when she thought she owned the light. One night, I ran into one of her colleagues at a bar. He was drunk enough to talk freely, loose enough to vent. "She's good," he admitted, swirling his whiskey. "But she plays dirty. Takes credit, twists stories. We all know it. Problem is, no one wants to be the first to call her out." I just smiled into my drink. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know the feeling." Because that was the truth. No one wanted to be the first. but I had no problem being the last. By then, I'd stopped feeling angry. The rage that once kept me awake at night had cooled into something sharper, quieter. Patience had replaced fury. And with patience comes precision. I kept waiting, watching, collecting. She thought silence meant defeat. She thought my lack of response was weakness. What she didn't see was the trap closing around her, inch by inch, proof by proof. And then came the night that told me she truly believed she was untouchable. She hosted a party, her promotion party, thrown under the guise of a networking event. Photos of the evening flooded my feed. Her, in a sequin dress, giving a toast about resilience. Her, standing next to executives, arm draped casually around their shoulders. Her, captioning the entire night with, "They said I couldn't, so I did." The applause, the admiration, the spotlight, it was all hers. And that's when I knew. She wasn't just climbing anymore. She was standing at the very edge of the cliff, smiling for the cameras. All it would take was one push. And I was ready. The promotion party should have been her crowning moment. And in many ways, it was. She wore that sequin dress like it was armor, raised her glass, and gave a speech about resilience, empowerment, choosing freedom. People clapped like she was delivering a sermon. Cameras flashed. The room buzzed. But the thing about standing in the spotlight is that people start to notice the shadows. I saw the first crack that same night. One of her colleagues, someone she'd pushed aside for a project, posted a cryptic message on LinkedIn. Nothing obvious, just, "Funny how success looks when it's built on the backs of others." It didn't name her, but the timing was no coincidence. I screenshotted it, filed it away. The next week, I heard about another. A junior employee, one she'd once promised to mentor, quietly resigned. Over drinks with Clara, I learned why. My wife had taken credit for her work in a major presentation, then casually implied the girl wasn't ready for responsibility. No one fought it. No one wanted to go up against the rising star. Except me. I didn't push. Not yet. I kept watching. Because every time she bragged, every time she posted another glittering photo about owning her power, she left behind breadcrumbs, little contradictions, small lies that didn't line up once you put them side by side. And I had them all. Meanwhile, my life with Clara was the opposite of hers. Quiet, real, grounded. She'd stay over on weekends, padding around my kitchen in an old t-shirt, hair messy, smile easy. We didn't need to perform for anyone. But sometimes I'd snap a photo anyway. A plate of pancakes, her hand resting on mine. The glow of the TV during a movie night. I posted them without captions, just images. No hashtags, no slogans. And those photos drove my wife insane. She'd text me late at night, venom dripping through the screen. "You're pathetic. You're embarrassing yourself. People are laughing at you." Then, sometimes, she's not even pretty. Everyone knows she's just a rebound. But if she truly believed that, why was she still watching? Why did she keep checking? Clara told me not to respond. "She wants to pull you back into her game," she said softly. "Don't give her the satisfaction." She was right. So I didn't. I stayed silent. I let my wife rage while the world applauded her curated image, never suspecting that the ground beneath her was already cracking. And then came the moment that told me it was almost time. I got a message. Not from her, not from Clara, but from a stranger, one of her colleagues. "You don't know me," it began. "But I thought you should see this." Attached was an email thread. My wife had thrown yet another coworker under the bus, this time to cover a mistake in financial reporting. She'd framed it carefully, of course, but the intent was obvious. Protect herself, sacrifice someone else. The colleague had quietly saved every message. And now, for reasons I didn't ask, they'd sent them to me. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words glowing like fire in the dark. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It wasn't whispers. It was proof. That night, I sat in my office with a folder open on my laptop. Screenshots, emails, photos, timelines. Months of quiet collecting. Piece by piece, it had become something undeniable. A story not of resilience or independence, but of manipulation, betrayal, and lies. I thought of her sequin dress, her glass raised high, her smile wide as the crowd clapped for her. I thought of her believing she was untouchable. And then I whispered to myself, almost. Because revenge isn't about rage. Rage is sloppy. Revenge is patience, precision. And my silence wasn't weakness. It was the sharpening of the blade. She was at the top now, looking down on the world. All I had to do was give the push. And when I did, it wouldn't just knock her off balance. It would send her crashing all the way down. There's a kind of silence that comes before a storm. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind. The air so thick you can feel it pressing on your chest. That's what the week felt like leading up to the strike. My wife was on a high. She'd just done a podcast interview about rebuilding after loss, where she called me, without naming me, a man who couldn't keep up with a strong woman. She laughed while saying it, and the host laughed too. That laugh echoed in my head all night. But instead of anger, I felt clarity. She'd peaked. She truly believed she was untouchable, which meant the timing was perfect. I spent 3 nights in my office, organizing. Proof spread across my desk and glowing on my laptop screen. Screenshots of her emails, throwing colleagues under the bus. A recording of her admitting she needed a scapegoat. Photos of her cozying up at networking dinners that looked less like business and more like auditions for attention. The messages, the whispers, the resignation letters. I wasn't sloppy. I didn't rant. I didn't insult. I built a story. The true story. Friday night, she posted a photo from another rooftop bar, arm draped around an executive, captioned, "Untouchable." The comments filled with fire emojis, clapping hands, cheers. She looked like a queen on her throne. I smiled at the screen. Because queens fall hardest when the crowd realizes the crown is fake. At 9:12 p.m., I hit post. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs with attached screenshots. Simple, precise. Funny how some people build their entire life pretending to be something they're not. I know, because I was there when the mask first slipped. While you clap for her independence, remember the colleagues she trampled to get here. Remember the lies she spun to shine brighter. This isn't empowerment. It's exploitation. And I've got the receipts. Attached were the files. Not speculation. Proof. I closed my laptop and set my phone on the counter. I didn't watch the numbers climb. I didn't need to. By morning, it was everywhere. Her followers flooded the comments, first with confusion, then with outrage. People demanded answers. Colleagues shared their own stories, confirming what I'd posted. Screenshots spread like wildfire, reshared, dissected, burned into timelines. By noon, her carefully built image had collapsed. I saw it unfold from a distance, sipping my coffee. She posted nothing that morning. No quotes, no rooftop shots, just silence. But others filled the void. A junior employee wrote a thread about how my wife sabotaged her career. A coworker revealed how she'd taken credit for his work. One by one, the stories stacked up until her empire was rubble. And me? I didn't say another word. My one post was enough. By evening, friends had unfollowed her, colleagues had distanced themselves, and the same people who'd once cheered now mocked her downfall. The stage she'd built for her glory had become the platform for her ruin. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat back, silent, patient, the same way I had been all along. Because revenge doesn't need applause. It just needs precision. And in that moment, watching her world burn, I finally felt free. The fallout wasn't slow. It was instant, brutal, and loud. By Monday morning, her office was a minefield. Emails leaked faster than the company could spin them. HR announced an internal review. The same executives who once clinked glasses with her at rooftop bars suddenly stopped answering her calls. Her promotion was suspended pending investigation. And the whispers? They became shouts. Colleagues who'd bitten their tongues for years finally spoke up. Stories piled onto each other, each one painting a picture of a woman who didn't climb the ladder so much as kick others off it. What she thought was a throne had turned into quicksand. I didn't see her in person. Not yet. But I saw her online. Her once glittering Instagram went dark for 2 days. Then, like a wounded animal, she tried to fight back. A long caption, white text on a black background. This is a smear campaign. Women are always punished for their ambition. I won't apologize for being strong. At first, a few loyal followers clapped. But the tide had turned. The comments filled with screenshots, contradictions, and flat-out anger. This isn't about ambition, it's about lies. You ruined my career and called it growth. We believed you. Never again. By the end of the day, she locked her account. Clara and I watched it unfold from the couch, a half-eaten pizza between us. She glanced at me. Does it feel satisfying? I thought about it. Really thought. The truth was, it didn't feel like fireworks or victory parades. It felt quiet. Heavy. Final. It feels like justice. I said at last. Still, the collapse wasn't just digital. Word traveled fast. A local blog picked up the story, then a business news site. Soon, her name wasn't in the context of empowerment, but exploitation scandal. Her carefully curated brand had rotted overnight. And in the midst of it all, she tried to reach me. Text at first. We need to talk. This is your fault. You've ruined me. Then voicemails. Her voice cracking between fury and desperation. You think you've won? You haven't. You've destroyed both of us. Do you understand that? Both. But she was wrong. She thought silence meant defeat. She never understood that silence was my weapon. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because the difference between us was simple, she needed an audience. I just needed the truth. Meanwhile, Clara stood by me. She never gloated, never pushed me to rub it in. She just held me when the weight of it all threatened to press down. Because even when you win, betrayal still leaves scars. One evening, a week after the post, I drove past our old house. Her car was in the driveway. Lights were on, but the curtains were drawn. I wondered if she was sitting inside, staring at her phone, refreshing a feed that now hated her. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel pity. I felt nothing. She'd wanted to humiliate me, to make me the fool in her story. Instead, she'd exposed herself. Her downfall wasn't my doing. It was hers. I just held up the mirror. Clara slipped her hand into mine as we drove away. It's over, she said softly. I nodded. Yeah, for her. But for me, it wasn't the end. Not yet. Because silence may have been my weapon, but closure, that was still coming. The collapse wasn't dramatic anymore. No screaming stages, no rooftop bars, no sequined speeches. It was quiet. A life unraveling thread by thread. 2 weeks after my post, she resigned. The company called it a mutual separation, but everyone knew the truth. You don't mutually separate from a senior manager position at the peak of her supposed career. She was forced out. And when the news leaked, there were no sympathy comments, no teary-eyed coworkers begging her to stay. Just silence. Her social media was gone too. One day locked, the next deleted. Years of curated quotes and staged smiles vanished with a button. But screenshots live forever, and her name was already etched into the internet's memory. Every search brought up the truth. I heard from a mutual friend that she tried to spin a comeback. New city, new job applications. But references matter, and whispers travel faster than resumes. No one wanted to touch the woman whose downfall had been public, documented, and merciless. And me? I didn't chase it. I didn't brag. I didn't even speak her name anymore. Because my life had already moved forward. Clara and I weren't flashy. We didn't need to be. We built something small but real. Sunday breakfasts with too much syrup. Walks by the river where she teased me about the way I skipped stones. Nights where the loudest sound was her laughter cutting through the quiet. One morning, I posted a photo of us at the kitchen table. Nothing fancy, just coffee mugs, sunlight streaming in, her hair still messy from sleep. The caption was only 2 words, found home. The likes came in, sure, but I didn't care about them. Because that photo wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. Proof that after all the noise, after all the humiliation, after all the betrayal, I'd found peace. Sometimes people asked me if I regretted it, exposing her, tearing her down in front of the world. My answer was always the same, no, because it wasn't me who tore her down. It was her. I just stopped holding up the scaffolding. And the truth? Silence was never weakness. It was patience. I'd let her believe she'd won, let her build her empire of lies higher and higher. She thought she was free when she'd really just tied herself to a time bomb. And when it went off, it didn't just splash water on a suit. It burned the whole stage down. Now, she lives in the shadows of what she once tried to be. A ghost of her own brand. And me? I live in the light of something real. In the end, she thought she humiliated me. She thought she wrote me as the fool in her story. But she never realized. I wasn't in her story anymore. I was writing my own. And this time, I was free.